So today our quick flipped 5 is going to be on how soil forms. This week's quiz, this week's topics are mostly about the weathering, the breaking down of rocks, but ultimately that will lead to soils, not just sand and clay. So let's do a quick overlook of the types of the soil horizons. So this was on the top of your worksheet. We went over this briefly at the beginning of class. This talks about how they form, but on the worksheet it also asks you what they're made up of. So the A horizon, I'll just go to the next one here. The A horizon is made up of all those really good, this is where most plants are growing. It's got soil, it's got bacteria, it's got a lot of what we call organic material, which is broken down dead things. So the decomposers are in there. There's a lot of living stuff in it, in addition to the sand and clay and the inorganic mineral stuff. So that's the A horizon. Good rich soil has lots of good A horizon. It's also known as topsoil. Any other information on the A horizon? Okay, so then the B horizon. The B horizon, as you might guess, is kind of in between. It's got some of a little bit more of the clay. It's got more of the minerals. It's not as good of soil, but it still has some of those components. As we saw over here, the B horizon, it develops as rainwater washes the clay and the minerals from the A into the B. So it just kind of extends it down, and it gives a better, I'm sorry, when we looked at this type of soil that just has an A on top of a C, it'll support some plant life, but not as much as the really rich, deeper with the B horizon in the middle that's got kind of that transition. Okay, and then the C horizon, as you can see by looking at it, it's got very little of the nutrients, so few nutrients. It does not have the, I'll say minimal organic, and this would be very poor soil for growing things. This down here is actually the bedrock that has not yet eroded. So there you've got those different levels. As we talked about at the beginning of class, when an area like a desert or where a volcano just erupted, you're just really going to have very thin, poor soil. And then over time, you get the A on top of the B, and then really rich, good soil with all that stuff in it has all three layers. Questions about the soil horizons? And again, a quick overview. It talks about what else is in soil, what types of soils are there. We're not going to go over all the types of soils, but I did want to talk a little bit about some of the soils we have around here that are very, I guess, kind of interesting. So different types of soils. This is just straight from the textbook, of course. All sorts of different ones. And not surprisingly, it tells you a little bit about where they are. There's plants, animals, other things in the soil, and the size of the particles. Again, you don't have to remember this, but obviously you should know that clay and silt are very fine, very tiny particles, the clay and the silt. Around here, in this part of Colorado, we have a lot of clay in our soils. We have something that's called bentonite clay, which is an expansive soil. And the reason this is important is the clay-like soils, they expand or contract depending on how much moisture is in it. If the moisture in the clay is the same all the time, it's not a big deal. But of course, around here, the moisture in the soil is not the same all the time. So the problem with this is if you build on it when it's dry, and then you have many wet years, and it expands, and it cracks the foundations, and it cracks the walls, and it can make your whole house unstable. This is out at the Flatirons Crossing Mall, they've actually had to tear down some of the buildings because of that. Around here, many of the areas around here, it is an issue with the houses. So just a quick aside on that, because you might think soils, who cares and what does it matter? It actually can matter a tremendous amount. And then finally, again, you don't need to memorize this, but just the fairly obvious that there are different types of soils in different places. And that obviously affects what things grow there. But you've got desert soils, mountain soils. So these are relatively thin soils, right? The tropical soils are richer. They've got much more of the organic material in there as well. So, quick overview. There was a list of words on the bottom of the worksheet. The main things you need to know that'll be on the quiz is just a brief thing about the different horizons and what's in each one, difference between soil and just sand.